we've all got the potential and capability to have those conversations with individuals. Because actually, in kind of in everyday life, we do that. It is part of just being kind of living and connecting with individuals. So we shouldn't be frightened to take those kind of values and put them in the business context, and actually have the courage to be able to do that. Because I think it potentially can have great results, really.
Restore is based in Oxford and is at the practical end of tackling mental health issues, and in particular supporting individuals recovering from periods of difficulty. Interestingly, we often talk about mental health challenges in the workplace and having been caused by the workplace. But Restore's work focuses on the workplace as a positive environment for good mental health, a place where individuals can find purpose, develop relationships, create focus in their lives, and learn new skills which help them in the future. Hello, this is ZEBR Talk. My name is Matt Mayer, and today I'm in conversation with Simon Newton, who's the Head of Operations at mental health charity Restore. Simon, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. Well, good to take part in this, I should say.
It's a real pleasure to have you on board. And I should just say, Restore is one of the charities that my business works with, and I'm very proud to be able to support the work that you do and have an opportunity to talk to you today about what Restore does and share some of the insights that you have. Looking at Restore's purpose, you talk about helping people take control of their recovery, developing skills, and living meaningful lives in the future, having done that. And I think it's an incredibly worthy purpose. We talk a lot about purpose generally in business these days, but that's a very clear and crisp sense of purpose for your work. Perhaps we could start by telling us a little bit more about what Restore does and some of the issues that you're confronting and challenging at the moment.
Well, Restore essentially is a charity which is about trying to maximize people's potential, really. But our work is particularly around people with mental health, severe and enduring issues often. And what we're trying to do really is to try and put together a program or a kind of environment where people with those particular issues are attracted to want to come to us, but also very much an environment which is about kind of a learning environment where people can kind of, experience making connections with other like-minded individuals, be exposed to, for example, practical issue creativity, that type of thing. So structured activity is a particular kind of our strength and I guess a unique selling point of Restore. So our services offer opportunities, for example, to work in cafes, to take part in workshops in terms of gardening, allotments, get involved in the actual potential community in providing those services. We also provide opportunities for people to perhaps experience becoming a volunteer and using their particular skills to come into our environments and use their particular skills to enable other individuals to really start to thrive. Because many of our people who come to us really are kind of in quite a stuck sort of place. They're not thriving. They're often kind of, quite disconnected from communities, quite disconnected from personal relationships. So our brief really is to try and tackle those particular issues. And our vehicle really is about providing activity, but also providing sensitive and skilled staff around that to kind of facilitate that process, to enable good sort of therapeutic relationships to be formed with individuals, to listen, to use basic things like to listen to individuals and to try and understand what particular often hidden strengths and abilities an individual might have, and provide the tap really for those to come on stream. And we've discovered, and our work really is that if we can do that, individuals can come into our service and really start to make improvements in tackling their kind of mental health issues and start to really rediscover themselves again and thrive. So we work across Oxfordshire. We've got various workshops. We also we work closely with members of the public. We have front-facing cafes, and we also have a college which is about enabling students from all across Oxfordshire to come and learn skills around mental health and develop their awareness. So that's another particular thriving arm of Restore. And I think it's important to say that part of our kind of remit is also to stigma bust and to tackle some of the myths out there about mental health, that people without those sort of difficulties can't reach their potential and often are, written off in many ways. So our work also is about raising mental health awareness, both in our local community, also, in terms of doing something today, for example, working with employers in terms of trying to ensure that there are opportunities out there for individuals who come through our services to be able to sort of potentially move forward in their lives by maybe getting a job or kind of moving towards that sort of outcome. So we've been operating for a number of years, I think it's over 30 plus years now in Oxfordshire. We're very much kind of, it's a real privilege to be involved with it, actually. I'd say it's an absolute privilege. But, at the moment, the main bit of work is really, we've obviously, like everybody else in kind of business, we're trying to sort of rejig our services to work with the challenges of what we're facing in terms of the pandemic. That's a challenge for us because we're having to look at different ways of working, trying to replicate the experience which we offer people in digital ways, trying to take care of our workforce to make sure they thrive under those sort of circumstances. We're obviously working within a funding envelope, which is particularly challenging. So we have to make sure that we attract appropriate stakeholders to want to get involved with our work, really, to fund us, but also that people want to form relationships with us so we can kind of build from that. So Restore's not seen in isolation. It's part of a kind of connection with other like-minded partners. So that's an important bit of work in these tough sort of funding times. And I think it's about making sense of the new world, really, the world of kind of, where we're at sort of post-COVID. Money's going to be mega tight. And there's also going to be, unfortunately, as we all know, there's going to be significant mental health need out there in terms of people with significant problems, which is not helped by the impact of the particular pandemic and COVID. So that's a particular challenge which is focusing our minds at the moment. So there's plenty of stuff going on. But
I think there's some really interesting themes in there, and I look forward to talking about some of those. It's not often someone describes their role as a privilege, so I think that's a great way to start our conversation. I think, from what I can see, one of the really refreshing things about the work that Restore and you are doing is the fact that it sees employment and work as potentially a solution to mental health challenges. I think so much of the dialogue in business at the moment is around the workplace as a cause of mental health challenge, but you've turned that round, and I think that's a really potentially quite an empowering message for businesses and employers. I'd love to hear more really about it at a practical level. What engagement you have with the business community and through your own initiatives with the college, and how that's making a positive contribution to the mental well-being and as you said, leading meaningful lives in recovery.
Well, one of our core services is around sort of the value of coaching. I know this is used throughout the business world, but we've taken that, and also we offer a particularly kind of mental health recovery view of coaching. But as part of our kind of our mission in terms of that particular service, we are having contact with kind of individuals, and we're wanting to kind of getting them into work. Because we recognise many of the individuals are coming to us and saying they want to work, but they need a bit of kind of coaching to try and discover where their particular skills lie, but also what opportunities might be out there. So our coaches are required to sort of liaise actively with the local kinds of businesses out there, with a view to trying to establish, what potential opportunities there may be out there. We also work with with job centre pluses, those particular people, those particular agencies, and other partners around that particular thing in terms of citizen advice bureaus or whatever it might be, in terms of trying to sort of tap into potential opportunities. And I think for us, we take a very sort of, I think for many individuals in mental health, they can have a lot of kind of downtime, and if we're struggling, sometimes that downtime can be in a ruminating way. It can be very quite sort of counterproductive, and can actually enable people to become quite. It can affect their functioning really, and so we tend to look at work as a means of giving focus, of providing space where a person is kind of challenged a bit in terms of to take notice of what's going around them. That's what you have to do when you go into a kind of a work environment. And so it's our belief and our terms of view that actually work potentially can be a real positive release in terms of now allowing an individual to kind of move forward. And as long as we and I suppose the caveat to that is, as long as if we as an employer can provide those kind of sensitive, mentally healthy type sort of workplaces to essentially support those individuals, what an absolute resource is out there that's that businesses can potentially tap in, because there's a huge amount of creativity out there which we discover, a huge amount of talent which has perhaps been kind of dormant. So it's kind of a no-brainer really from our point of view in terms of but I think it's a sort of joint there's a kind of the challenge there to employers and to us, because we're an employer, to make sure that the environments and things like that are mentally healthy as it can be, to enable those sort of individuals to thrive. I think there's an education aspect. I mean, I think for all of us in terms of in our careers, there's a sense of wanting to sort of move forward, and that's involved in terms of committing and investing into learning new skills. And I think that's kind of that ties in a little bit to the way Restore develops its recovery college, which is open to all individuals in Oxfordshire, and that is a way of helping kind of individuals to in a sense to sort of to carry out or to take part in some training, to skill development in terms of to enable them to be a more attractive proposition when they move forward. And I think that's a kind of really important, really, in terms of that. So those are the kind of main things I would kind of potentially highlight, really, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I think that the point you make about focus is really interesting, and of course, we've seen through the pandemic, I think a societal reevaluation of how important rather than negative work can be in exactly as you said, creating focus, but also providing the social context, the human context within which to do that. And I think we hear a lot in the media about the challenges to mental health of the current arrangements, not just lockdown, but the presence of a pandemic and how people perceive that. Is that something real that you're seeing in your work and your interactions with the people that you support?
I think it is. I mean, I think when we talk to our individuals, because we like everybody else are having to we've had to, through processes like lockdown, try and engage with our individuals that use our services in digital ways, for example. I know this is not news to anybody, but it is important in terms of some of the things that we're picking up. Is that one, we are picking up that in a sense people are becoming more disconnected from their usual, because work is an important, as you mentioned, an important kind of social network. But it also provides, I think, I wouldn't disregard just the importance of things like having a routine in life and things like that. So we're finding when we're reaching out to our individuals that their normal routines of attending one of our recovery groups, for example, have been disrupted, sort of significantly disrupted. And we're finding that is having quite a significant kind of sort of, impact on some of those individuals in terms of that. So there's the kind of key things around that. And also, I think just that sort of, that ability to kind of, when we do a lot of teamwork in our services, if you're working in a cafe or producing something, you're having to work with a bunch of other individuals. So it's that feeling of working in a team, which is shared throughout our service. And I think, it's obviously a key thing in business, but it's kind of, not having those kind of routines, or we're noticing is having quite a significant kind of impact. And it just gives, I mean, there's something about kind of, it just gives one a sense of achievement, at the end of the day, or in terms, I mean, no, it sounds, but it's important, I think. And I was just at a service just now, actually, in kind of, in one of our cafes in which provides kind of, it's a cafe. It's on lockdown at the moment, but we're trying to sell and we're doing stuff for the local community. But one of the guys there had been working as a team, and they just produced a whole load of this great big sort of bunch of kind of cakes and all that sort of stuff. But he was kind of sharing it out and all that sort of stuff, and that sense of achievement about teamwork, achievement about that kind of thing. It was just good to see. I think it's an important sort of factor in terms of thinking.
I'm a big fan of and student of positive psychology. So I think that whole idea of growth mindset, of actually focusing on achievement and goals and using coaching to support that is really fascinating in the context of recovery. I was lucky enough to record a podcast recently, which we will be launching soon, with Lord Stevenson, who was the co-author of the government's report on Thriving at Work, which came out in 2017, which was a really, really interesting read. And one of the things he said to me, which struck me, was if as an organisation you don't think you've got a mental health problem, you're failing. And I sort of challenged him around that, or certainly listened to him around that. And what he was saying was, if the stats are right, and 1 in 4 people have some form of anxiety or mental health issue, and that's reflected in the workplace, we all have mental health issues to deal with. And that certainly resonated with me. And the question I was going to ask you is, do you sense that people in business and wider society are becoming more literate in mental health and finding it easier to not just recognize mental health issues, but have a strategy to help support them? Or is that wishful thinking?
Do you know, I think there has been quite a lot of sort of positive kind of movement on that over the last few years, really, I think. Certainly I picked it up. And I mean, some of it's about the kind of, the greater profile given to stigma campaigns and some of the stuff that we've seen. Prominent people coming out talking about their kind of mental health experiences, prominent sportsmen, for example, people in kind of, I wish there was a few more people perhaps leading business that would come out and be more open, and some of the royals also and things like that. So I think there's been a general sort of opening up of kind of discussions, and I guess the kind of the permission to have those discussions in terms of demystifying mental health and kind of owning it. Because I think what we're trying to do in kind of restore, I think it's right. It is part of the workforce, but it's actually part of all our lives in terms of as individuals and as family members and all that. So it's actually part of our lives. So it seems a bit strange to not think of it being present in the workplace, because it's actually sort of part of our lives. I think what I would say about that is kind of, it really is that if we accept that sort of premise, then let's kind of, and I think this is where there is still work to do, but let's try and sort of think about how we can get it talked about in the workplace. I think is a kind of key thing. So it's suddenly the sort of, it becomes a kind of normal part of the culture for people in business and people in Restore to be able to have conversations around that area in the workforce, or in groups, sort of in kind of, in settings such as where teams come together and all that type of thing. And I think one of the things that often there is still an element of kind of people feeling that that's a sort of arena for specialized kind of mental health kind of doctors or social workers or wherever it might be, or that's a kind of a setting for them, and I'm not going to get involved with that type of thing. And I think there's actually some of that is kind of, is around sort of, being quite scared about getting in those conversations, because, I think kind of there's a feeling perhaps if I start talking about these issues, is it going to make it worse, or is the person suddenly going to have a real blowout, or in terms of that, and what do I do? Those kind of basic things. But I think what I would argue, and I think there has been movement, is that kind of, having basic sort of conversations with an employer about, their well-being, because their well-being is directly going to affect the way they perform. So if we're all interested in getting the best out of the people that work for us in terms of that, then what a mad world if you don't talk about one of the things that's a key point of each other's kind of workers' lives. So if you ignore that, then you're missing a trick, really. You need to sort of be able to have those sort of conversations. So I think there has been positive movement, but I think there's still some way to go in terms of, and I think I think it's good to see it head in that direction. I guess I think those sort of conversations may well become increasingly more important as we do suffer, the re-emergence from the pandemic in terms of that. And I think, I was thinking about this today, but there's also a lot of people that are coming back into the workplace having been furloughed and things like that. And if we as an employer don't actively have those discussions with those individuals when they return about what that experience is like, and in terms of that, then I think then then I think there's a danger that kind of maybe some well-being issues will become quite submerged, and then the danger is that they can become quite destructive, and then you've got people going off for long periods, and the sort of the impact that has on businesses, but also obviously acutely on those individuals themselves. I mean, the real difficulty in mental health is often it's getting in early. It's sort of it's intervening early. When mental health starts to be kind of left to sort of fester, or if it in a sort of in a negative way, then often the journey back each time becomes more and more difficult. So that's kind of what I would say on that. If that makes sense.
Total sense. I mean, I think that there's a couple of interesting themes in there for me. One is the importance of acknowledging that return to the workplace, which is in any situation I think would be a difficult transition for people, and exacerbated if there are mental health issues, which that touches. But also acknowledging that for many people, they're returning to a very different workplace to the one they left in March or September or whenever they left that workplace. And, that can be incredibly unsettling and needs to be acknowledged by leaders in business.
Well, yeah. I think teams may be very different. There may be less people, so those people that you've built those kind of team relationships with that have been kind of, because of the nature of, cutting back on resources, and there's going to be quite a lot. I would totally agree. There's going to be a lot of change to try and make sense of. So I think it's about as employers and as managers, it's about us having the courage to tackle those issues, and I think to sort of take responsibility for them, to try and think about areas in the workplace that we can think about this. And it doesn't mean. It's often not about really radical kind of innovations, or in terms of that. It's, tweaks to the environment type things, looking at, where the issues around flexibility in terms of bringing in, using digital type stuff or forums in terms of, to have conversations related to one's well-being. Those kind of things can be incredibly powerful. So, and not hugely kind of expensive, or doesn't require a huge kind of financial investment. What it does require is an investment from leaders like myself in Restore and others, to be able to have that willingness to want to kind of go down that road, if it makes any sense.
I think that point you made about people's desire to do their best work, and the fact that if we don't provide an environment where they can do that, we not only have the human cost of mental health, but also the economic cost. It is a really important one, and that's not me trying to make a business case for dealing with mental health, because I think it stands aside from that. But it's just acknowledging that actually addressing these issues is incredibly important to the individual, their organisation, their family, and of course taking a broader view, the economy. More generally. So I think that is a really relevant point. And I think if we don't create an environment, from a leadership perspective, many of the people listening to this podcast will be in leadership roles. Arguably, we're all in leadership roles. Many of them will be be thinking, well, actually, is it my responsibility? What can I do? Is there someone else in the organisation that deals with that problem, that issue? And I think I'm interested in your views on this. My philosophy has always been, if you don't know what's going on in everyone's lives, and you're not in a position to provide anything on a range from empathy to an environment that supports those challenges, you're not leading properly. And I put my hands up and I fail in many areas on that, but certainly as an ambition, I think as leaders we should be trying to understand so that we can give people the best opportunity to contribute.
I think, you're often some of the greatest, I suppose, some of the great sort of sports leaders or captains or whatever, that I was going to think of the examples that that we can think of. But often, for example, take, Eddie Jones, a rugby coach or something that we probably all know. I know he takes often the way he talks, he takes a close interest in the individuals in his particular team. And he's quite interested in what's going on in terms of, their overall picture. It isn't just about whether a guy can, do 16 scrums in or whatever it might be, that he's actually quite interested in the sort of the other, and he's talked about it, the other sense of the kind of, the whole aspect, the 360-degree idea of an individual. And I guess as kind of, as leaders, it's a challenge really for us to think about that and to put the time in, to have those conversations and I think that it's a challenge. You've got about 100 million things coming through one's desk, or kind of 200 emails or whatever it might be that you get, to invest in having those conversations and trying to get a sense of knowing your team, where an individual is, not in terms of not just the kind of the numbers they're producing, but the overall picture of what's going on, is I would say really important and a challenge to us all really in terms of that.
I think one of the interesting things about working in a lockdown environment has been that, certainly anecdotally, I think people feel that they know a lot more about their colleagues than perhaps when they were working in the office, because they're not just seeing their homes, but they're having to be much more sensitive to the personal commitments that people have in doing that. So maybe we one positive to come out of all of this is we're seeing a sea change in how we understand each other's context.
I think there's something about family as well. I think I'd throw in the family side as well. I think, it's not, I've been on a number of Zoom calls where you get interactions with one of my workers' family, which you would never have, because of something, I don't know, the screams or somebody walks in or whatever it might be. But I think I've certainly found that I've got a greater knowledge, I think, just in terms of what are the kind of quality of the sort of the social networks that they've got, or the quality of their situation of individuals who work under me, for example, than I would agree, than I had, before lockdown started in terms of that. So I think that's the sort of, it's an opportunity, I guess, to sort of reflect on that and to think. And I think having that sort of knowledge helps inform those developmental conversations which one has at various intervals. In Restore, we have regular kind of week supervision type meetings. Like in business, you have similar things, I'm sure. But in terms of, it helps inform those forums to make sure that it is a complete conversation, but notwithstanding, not losing sight of the kind of, the overall aims and business objectives of, for Restore. That's not lost in that process. It's actually enhances in terms of that. But that makes sense.
So the $1 million question that I guess would be on many of our listeners' lips is from your experience, how can people recognise emerging mental health issues in the workplace, and what's the best thing that they can do to help improve the situation, improve mental well-being generally in their businesses?
I think often one thing that I look for in terms of that is there's almost like kind of one of the sort of I guess there's kind of warning signs and things like that which you would look out for. And I think it's certainly in terms of, the things I would look out for is we look for things like withdrawal and a kind of reluctance to want to engage in the life of Restore or anything like that. So often individuals might kind of, be kind of drop off that kind of particular radar. So become more isolated. There might be more sense of kind of, unpredictability. I guess kind of, not meeting the usual kind of routines and all that sort of stuff is often a sign in terms of, those kind of, I mean, sometimes I was thinking, but kind of not meeting those normal kind of flow of deadlines, which we all get. So if those start to slip, this often can be little things to look out for in terms of, and I think also it's just kind of, if one notices, if an individual often is attempting to try and seek out help, people are often, so it's noting those contacts, I think, is often a sign. So if our kind of systems can pick up or note that when an individual is coming forward and picking up, that we can keep note of that, because it's often, if people are struggling, or if then they often talk about it in some forum or another in terms of that. It's sort of, it's having our business and our kind of our radar attached to that to be able to sort of pick it up. And I mean, there's, generally, if when mental well-being suffers, we look like it's suffering. You can almost kind of read people's kind of, I don't know, the manner and all that sort of thing. But it's important to be in tune to body communication and kind of language in terms of that sort of thing. So, because often we display what's going on we might think we hide it, but often it's kind of, it's around in terms of that. So it's pick it. And also, I guess, things like the things you might look for in terms of, the sort of HR things about, not absence and all those sorts of things, and kind of, potentially those are the kind of, those sort of things would indicate there could be issues in terms of around. So I think it's about kind of, what we try and what we say in Restore is it's really important to try and sort of, to have those conversations, to sit down with those team members or whatever it is, and just ask in a kind of, just in a human way, really, just what's going on, kind of, and just start to have a normal kind of conversation, which is what it should be, just in terms of exploring those at an early opportunity. Often, and I've been guilty of that, certainly in my early part of the career, was in a sense kind of, I remember I had an experience quite a few years, when I was starting out in management, but I remember there was an individual and I kind of left it. I was quite frightened. I wasn't sure what to say. I didn't know how to kind of tackle it. So I kind of left it. And then it manifested itself in kind of something more, potentially a much longer absence when the thing, because it came out. Often these issues come out in some way or another. So I think it's about having those conversations. And then it's about sort of not being frightened to put together a kind of a plan or a plan around that, really. And that's where there are certain elements of kind of, of mental health. It's often about, seriousness. Often if we have an employee who's got really serious mental health problems, then there is kind of, obviously sort of health intervention, specialist intervention, which one has to work with one's HR and to be able to flag. But there is a step before that often, which is about having those sort of initial kind of conversations to tackle some of those areas and putting a little plan in. And we often, I know Mind talk about it, but putting ways around. There's the 5 ways to well-being, which you may be familiar of, which is a kind of, it's really a philosophy around that sort of covers ways of maintaining well-being. But this idea around connecting and being active, taking notice, learning and giving, there's kind of 5 core themes there. So often planning around some of those areas can do the trick, in a sense of kind of, and then wrapping it around the context of the business environment one's working in, is often a really good way forward. And I think it's just worth saying out there that, we've all got the potential and capability to have those conversations with individuals, because actually in kind of in everyday life we do that. It is part of just being kind of living and connecting with individuals. So we shouldn't be frightened to take those kind of values and put them in the business context, and actually have the courage to be able to do that. Because I think it potentially can have great results, really.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, and just it's so easy. I think in a commercial environment, in a business environment, to think you've got an excuse not to be human, and actually a lot of what you're talking about is humanity. It's about the way we interact with each other outside work, and there's no reason why that that can't be replicated in work. And I think, the best, I'm blessed with a very positive culture in my business, and the best businesses that we work with, really have replicated that human family type culture in their organizations. And clearly that's a good ambition for anybody. One of the best pieces of advice I was once given for dealing with mental health issues, and I've worked with colleagues who have quite serious mental health issues, through to people who are just struggling and have some lighter well-being issues, but nonetheless all important. And the advice I was given was to be patient, and also to make sure you look after yourself when you're trying to deal with these. And on that latter point, I wondered if you had any thoughts on that, really, how those involved in supporting mental health can make sure that they themselves are kept safe and well.
Well, I think there's two things to that. I think the kind of what I was talking there earlier, just briefly before, was about the kind of looking after oneself in terms of as a manager or as a senior leader is important. So the kind of the basic themes around making sure that we connect with other people, they're being active, those kind of sort of themes are equally important for us as individuals to try and practice that, and to try and sort of to try and ensure that we have a vibrant life as much as one can do, in terms of outside work, and we look after ourselves, I guess, in terms of that, and be attentive to our own selves in terms of it. This is really important, I think, in terms of trying to tackle some of those areas. I think the other thing is just kind of there is an element of kind of knowing one's limitations. We can't solve the world, and sometimes mental health problems can be really entrenchable and don't go away very easily, I think, is the terms of that. So I think patience is a key thing, but I think we need to also recognize our own limitations. So and we have to get that kind of feeling when we feel like perhaps things are kind of, we haven't quite got a handle on this, or things aren't quite, we're not seeing the improvement in an individual perhaps that we would like to see, that we know it's okay to kind of ask for help and use the kind of structures around the kind of organization in terms of, other structures which may be available, external support that may be available. I know various organizations have different structures around that, but I think don't be frightened, I guess, to be able to take those sort of decisions and to feel, and to open it up. I think, we're lucky in Restore, really, because we have a sort of a senior management executive team, which, if we have issues related to I guess, for example, mental health in the workplace, then we can collectively look at it and share experience in terms of in that area with each other. So it becomes less of a one-on-one problem. It becomes more of a kind of, we can use the team around us to be able to kind of, to try and, move it forward. And I think it's knowing what's out there. There may be people in the organization that, have got, knowledge around in more detail, kind of, about things that we can specifically do related to issues related much to significant depression or significant stress or any other kind of it's using the kind of expertise of people around. And that's important, I think. We're blessed really in Restore, obviously, because it's our business. It's kind of in terms of that. But I'm aware for people, taking part or listening to this podcast, then that's not the same. So it's about sort of, don't be frightened to kind of seek out support and advice around those particular issues, because there are plenty of it around now, I think, to be able to offer that. There's also plenty of sort of guidance, the way to sort of, to build up plans and to try and sort of build strategies around that. And I think one of the key, I think it's about sort of, I guess, allowing people to take ownership of their own plan, because people have responsibility in it. It's not about you as an employer you're not, in a sense, you're not responsible for a person's, it's a joint, people have responsibilities. So it's kind of, it's making sure that comes into the sort of, into the planning process in terms of, to make sure that it's kind of shared and it's open. It's empowering and that type of thing. But it isn't around the employer, having a magic wand and solving everything and taking responsibility for solving it. It's a joint issue, if that makes sense.
Simon, there's a lot in there that's insightful, but also, and what I'm really grateful for, a lot in there that's very practical. So that's been some really interesting insights into your work, but also some of the issues that many of the leaders who are listening to the podcast will be facing. How can people find out more about Restore and what you do, and also acknowledging that not everyone's in the Oxfordshire region? How can they look to help more broadly? Where can people engage with organisations, charities like Restore?
But I think in terms of let's take Restore. I mean, we obviously have a lovely kind of website which people are more than welcome to check out. Please do. Restore.org.uk in terms of that, but it gives a really good flavour, I think, of the particular work which we do. We've also got various Facebook and all the kind of usual sort of social networking stuff which we do. Please check us out. That's really kind of important. I mean, I think we haven't talked much, but Restore is very much, partnership is very important to Restore. In Oxfordshire, we have a kind of mental health partnership. So we're engaged with right from big, Oxford Health, which is the kind of the health body which delivers mental health care, to a whole load of other sort of third sector organisations. So we're effectively joined together in a strategic way. And I mean, that's something which I think is really important, actually. It gives us kind of, it gives us resilience to be able to tackle, but it's also a wonderful kind of flow of information across that in terms of, and I think, there are organisations. I would urge employers to look at our partners, like, for example, Oxfordshire Mind, National Mind, have lots of stuff which is really worth engaging with. There's Mindful Employer, which is, an organisation based around the Devon Partnerships Trust, which has got lots of resource around for helping line managers work with mental health in the workplace. There's an awful lot out there, really, if one looks. So please don't be frightened to have a look. It's well worth it in terms of that. Have a look at that. So that's what I would probably recommend, having a look.
Great, and that sits really nicely, Simon, with the general message of keep your awareness levels high, and everyone can make a positive contribution. Thank you so much for your time today, and look forward to keeping in touch. Thanks, Simon.